Schofield and Ella Whelan. Ella, what did you make of that?
Well, more of Wes Streeting's proposal.
Thank you.
Still with us here in the studio, Kevin Schofield and Ella Whelan. Ella, what did you make of that?
Well, actually, they should make more of Wes Streeting's proposals for reform in the NHS, because a lot of, he initially did make the point about changing the way in which nurses are trained, but then he made these statements and then he sort of had to row back because it sounded like he was criticising the NHS, and the Labour Party is very nervous about criticising the NHS. But just on the kind of the proposals for I share your exasperation, Angela, with the inability to put any kind of meat on the bones when it comes to plans for the
And you still didn't answer me.
But the only thing that he had any kind of detail about was investment in wind and solar, which is fine. That's all right. But as we know with the news out this week, that companies are National Grid is having to pay people to not use electricity because the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining enough in order for us to heat our homes and to keep us warm and all the rest of it. People listening to that are going to say, but hang on a minute, that's not going to be the brilliant, innovative way, solution to all of our problems.
Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously wants to get across the message that they're a government in waiting. I think he said it about 4 or 5 times. Yeah. I think the difficulty the Labour have got at the moment is that if they do put more meat on the bones, and I can understand why people want to actually hear what they want to do, is that if it's a good idea, the Conservatives can just nick it. I mean, they did that with the windfall tax, the windfall tax, and the government set their face against it until they realise actually this is really popular.
But that's playing politics. That's politics, isn't it? And Keir Starmer's saying today we put country before party.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's a nice soundbite, but at the end of the day they want to get elected, and they're playing it ultra safe at the moment because they probably can't even believe their luck at how far they still are ahead in the polls. They're biting your hand off for that this time last year, and they're just, I think, terrified of scaring the horses, which I think has been a kind of historic thing with Labour. You know, people always. I tend to think people like to give the Conservatives the benefit of the doubt. They're always a bit more sceptical of Labour. So Labour have to play it ultra cautious, which is what they're doing.
Well, tying in with that and who's getting the benefit of the doubt, I've got to ask you about the Mail, Kevin, just because they mentioned Terry and June. I'm a huge fan of Terry and June. Shows my age. But the Tories worried about losing the Terry and June generation.
Yeah, what they're saying is that...
Sorry to stop you both. Should we explain to the younger members of the audience who Terry and June were? Because there'll be people who have no clue.
No, the producers don't know. It was a sitcom. It was a sitcom. June Whitfield and Terry Scott.
Correct. In the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a comedy series, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Of like a middle-aged couple living in a sort of traditional middle-aged sort of...
It was very funny.
Absolutely, it was very funny. But what they're saying is that generation of middle-aged people who were more in tune with older people in terms of their outlook on life, were more small C conservative, that's gone now. And the middle-aged people, 40s, 50s, they're actually more likely to have the same views as younger people, and they're saying that spells doom, was the quote, for the Conservatives, because they rely on voters becoming more conservative as they get older and then voting Tory. Whereas if they are remaining more progressive, more liberal further into their lives, then they're less likely to vote Tory.
You're a comparatively younger person compared to the rest of us on the panel. Not by much.
Cheek of it!
How dare you?
No. But what do you make of it?
No, it's an interesting point that I think I'm just on the cusp of the millennial, because I'm 31 now, generation, and it is true that there is a much bigger leap between my generation and my parents than my parents and my grandparents in terms of values, or not in terms of values, in terms of sort of the way in which we present ourselves in society. And I think that it might be the case that there is still, people do, it's not that you become conservative, but you do have to start thinking about things like being sensible with your finances, what kind of values you're giving to your kids and all that sort of stuff as you get older, if you have children. But I think there's a sort of a self-consciousness among the millennial generation where they still want to be, there's a lot, I don't have any problem with older people wearing skinny jeans and things like that, but there's a lot more of a kind of an unwillingness to sort of age in a way that of my generation, which I think might cause some problems later on.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, isn't it? I do think ageing well I think it's a big thing when you get to, I don't know, Kevin, if you found this, but sort of late 30s, where you suddenly think, I can't wear this anymore.
Well, I'm going to wear my leather. Maybe I should wear my leather trousers to work tomorrow. Emma, I have to ask you about the story that's taken your attention, the headline in the Telegraph about Nicola Sturgeon.
Yes, this is just quite remarkable because, I mean, everybody at this point, unless you've been living under a rock, knows the row that's been happening with the Scottish Gender Recognition Reform Bill. And then there was this sort of tricky situation in which a male rapist was going to be put into, or be kept in a women's prison until Nicola Sturgeon, who was the person was just decided that they were a trans woman, until Nicola Sturgeon came in and stopped it from happening. Which, you know, was a glimmer, I think, of sensible kind of light in a sort of moment of madness for the Scottish First Minister. But then she's now gone on to the News Agents podcast, which is Global's new podcast, and described people who stand, you know, she says women's rights, people who stand up for women's rights are used as a cloak to be transphobic. And she says that lots of these people who are critics of self-ID are deeply misogynist, often homophobic, possibly some of them racist as well. So essentially what she's saying is anyone who disagrees with me is a scumbag. That's what it reads like. And it's an incredible kind of arrogance for somebody who has proven their political judgment to be so poor.
But in a sense, and I get what you're saying, but under some circumstances, people can use a cloak of something to be transphobic, can't they? To not understand actually what the real situation is, just briefly.
There's a nuanced discussion to be had about not labelling all trans people as, you know, deviants or sex offenders, and that's obviously incredibly important. But I think most people understand that if you think that, you know, sex difference is important in a prison system, you're not a racist, a misogynist, or a bigot.
No, we're out of time. Kevin, Ella, thank you both very much. It's been great to see you this morning. And we're back in a couple of minutes, aren't we?
We are.
Good morning.